So good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending of your time zone. My name is Annabelle. I'm very pleased to be your host today for this first Tableau Analytics User Group. So what makes this Tableau User Group a little unique? It's a user group that is dedicated to analytics in Tableau. Our goal is to showcase how to do things in Tableau, whether in Tableau Desktop, Web Edit, or as data. The objective is that we met like every 6-8 weeks, and that each time after the session or the day after, you are capable of using what you have learned of Tableau on your at work on the following day. So very practical things. And we will have the pleasure each time to have the Tableau team joining each time that we will have a new Tableau release. So make sure to subscribe with this QR code here that you see to be informed each time we will have a new meetup. And we have also like a forum page. So some word about us, the leader. So I have the chance to do this Tableau user group, to lead this Tableau user group with Sedale. You want to say hi, Sedale?
Hey, everybody. Thanks all for coming.
So Sedale is a digital intelligence and insight analyst. He's working for Purple Strategy from the US. And I will introduce him a little later because we have the chance today. He's also a speaker. So let me just introduce myself very quickly. So I'm Annabelle. I'm very passionate about Tableau. I am leading the Tableau Center of Enablement for Swiss Bank, Fontobel, in Zurich. My passion are Tableau, my dog, and chocolate, I have to admit. And during my free time, plus of leading this cool initiative, I'm also leading a Data Plus Women initiative in Zurich. Here, the QR code if you want to register for our event. This initiative is to promote women working with or around data. So let's talk about how it will work today. This is a Zoom call. On the bottom part of this Zoom, you have a chat section where you can say, hi, say where you're coming from and this kind of thing. If you want to ask Q&A question either to the organizer or to the speaker, please use the Q&A box. It's much easier for us to be able to track the question. And please, today, the only rule is to enjoy. What we want is that you just enjoy what you are looking for. The session is being recorded and it will be posted after that on the Tableau YouTube channel. And don't worry, we will send you anyway an email later on with all with the link, so you will be able to track it more easily. What I would like to ask you is that, you know, our speakers are doing that totally for free on their free time. So please, if you would like, you can also send them some love in social media using the hashtag Analytics Tableau User Group or Twitter account, and also tag them also on the message. It's always good to have some love and see that you have been appreciated by the community. So very quickly through the agenda, I will introduce you our amazing speaker today. First, we will have Lorna Brown. Lorna is a Tableau Zen Master and Tableau Public Ambassador. She started a journey in a training through an analytic training program, vastly well known, the data school, and she's now a consultant. I mean, you really don't want to mess with her. She's a junior, she was a junior Taekwondo world champion, and the presentation today will be about her favorite tips in Tableau. And I can't wait to learn from you, Lorna. I'm sure that the session will be awesome.
Thanks, Annabelle.
Then we will have Heidi. Heidi is a Tableau social media ambassador. The first time she met Tableau was during a job as a software developer, and now she's working for the Information Lab. She's also co-leading an initiative, Data Plus Women, but in Germany. And if you want to follow her in social media, please use the hashtag. If you want to know more about this Data Plus Women initiative, you can find all the information on the Tableau user group. The only thing that I cannot understand and relate with Heidi is inconsiderate love for alpaca. over Tableau. And Heidi will present when to use set versus parameter action. And then, last but not least, we will have Sedale. Sedale is a desktop specialist, a Tableau feature author, but also is leading this community equity task force. And now, of course, this Tableau User Group. And I can't wait that we can all meet again to the next Tableau conference, because Sedale will bring some wine. And I hope that we could enjoy together. Sedale will present adding context to your dashboard. So between each presentation, we will have some time for the Q&A. And we will have also some time at the end of the session to go back. Now we'll stop sharing my screen and I will pass the mic to Lorna.
Perfect. Thank you, Annabelle. I'm looking forward to helping you with your Tableau journeys with some tips today. So let's start with sharing my screen. So as Annabelle introduced, I am a Tableau Zen Master and a Tableau Public Ambassador, and I work for the Information Lab here in the UK. I also run an initiative called Workout Wednesday, which is a weekly challenge where you get tested on your technical skills within Tableau. So definitely check that out. And I can post the link in the chat a little bit later. So I'm just going to go through some of my tips throughout this session. If I'm going too fast, which I tend to do sometimes, please just let me know and I will slow it down a little bit. But hopefully you'll be able to catch up with most of it in the recording. Don't take any notes because, like I just said, I'll probably be going a bit too fast to make any notes, but the recording will be available after the session. So with that, let's get started. So my first sort of section of tips is all about the new data model. Now, the data model allows you to do different things with your data. You can create those relationships. So if I go to edit my data source, you'll see that I have this monthly targets data. With 2020.3, relationships was introduced with 2020.3.2, but then when we moved to 2020.3, they allowed this new relationship calculation. So if I join make a relationship with my data, you can see that it automatically pops up with a field. And then we want to see what other fields we want to relate on. So we have our month field on our right-hand side, but our order date is currently at individual orders. So we want to roll that up to the monthly level. So I'm going to create a relationship calculation. So here we're going to do a date trunk month of the order date. And I also need to wrap that all in a date field because the month from my monthly targets is also as the date. So if I click OK and bring that through, we now have our relationship set up. The reason why it's great to use relationships for this particular example is because if I look at my orders table, I have for every month, there is multiple rows of data. And if I did a old style join on this particular data, I'd end up having to create a level of detail calculation to bring back the right figure for my targets. Whereas Tableau is now interpreting what is in my view and rolls it up to the correct level of data. So if I go back, what we can see now is I have my orders table and I have my monthly targets. If you have it in this order, you might need to change it to group by data source table first off, but we no longer have a distinct difference between our measure names and measure values, apart from this thin little line, and that's per individual table. So I have dimensions and measures per my relationship table. I then also have this bottom section here, which is kind of like the no man's land. And what I tend to talk about is that this is where your calculations go when Tableau doesn't know what level of detail you want to do this particular calculation at. And it will be dependent on what is in your view. But what I can now do is I can add my targets to as a dual axes, and then I can have my bars and my Gantts, so that I can, and don't forget to synchronize those axes, because otherwise they end up the wrong, giving the wrong information. So I'm just going to change my sails to gray. And notice how my Gantt bar, whenever I move the size up, it only ever gets taller, but maybe I want it to get a little bit thicker. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double click in my marks card, and I'm going to say the average of 1,000. And then I'm going to drag that onto my size. Maybe 1,000 was a little bit too much, but okay, so let's reduce it to 100. But now you can see that my Gantt bar is a little bit thicker, which allows you to see them a little bit better. So definitely use that one in the future. Also, for here, we've got our reference lines in the background and 0 lines, but you can turn all them off with a quick some selections. So if I go to Format and Workbook, in the lines section, you can turn off all of your grid lines for all of your future sheets and turn off those 0 lines as well. The only thing you can't do here is rows and borders, which again is a different story, but you can change the fonts as well. So if you have a specific font that your company uses, you can then change all of your fonts in the workbook at any one time. I see a question about which Tableau is being used for this demo. This particular version is 2020.4, but most of the things I'm talking about is pre-2020.4. So going on to spatial joins. Now, spatial is an interesting concept within Tableau, but there's lots of fun things that we can do. So this crime data, what we have is we have a latitude and longitude for every single crime point within this particular data set. And we also have our London boroughs, which is a shape file. So if I just put this on here, you'll see that we have individual shapes. And if I go back to my crime data, we have an LSOA name. So if I right click and describe, you'll see it gives you some names in there. And I could just pass out the first couple of letters and get rid of the codes at the end, and that would give me my boroughs. But why would I want to do that when I can do spatial joins? So if I go to my new sheet, now I'm hoping this doesn't refresh my extract, but we will see. What we want to do here is we want to do a join to our spatial file. So what we need is a join calculation. Now this make point is a new feature within Tableau. I think it came in around 2019 something, maybe even 2020. But this allows you to give a geometric field within your data, as long as you have a dedicated latitude and longitude. So what this allows us to do is if I go to my number of crimes, don't we do that? There we go. What this is going to do is it's going to give us the number of crimes in the borough. So if I double click my geometry and bring that in, and this may take a little bit of time because my extract wanted to refresh. The crimes data has probably around 20,000-ish records that it's trying to join to. So this is why it's taking a little bit longer to execute this query. Hopefully it doesn't take too much longer. I'm really bad at filling time as well, so I can't tell any jokes to fill the time. So maybe I'll ask a question, answer a question, in the chat.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, we were getting quite a few questions around whether or not this workbook will be available. Is there a way to access these tips after this talk?
Yeah, so on my Tableau public page, I have several different versions of the Tableau tips that I'm doing today. So definitely check those out on Tableau public. And I can get the link after I've done it and put it into the chat for you. So now we have our boroughs. I'm going to just split that down by our name again. Now it's loaded. It shouldn't take too much longer. Hopefully. This is why you create extracts sometimes and not have live data. Okay, come on, Tableau. But essentially what this is doing now is, because it's done that join together, we can now plot all of those individual crimes inside those particular boroughs to find out where our hotspots are, rather than having to try and create calculations to do that. So now what we could do if I didn't undo the extract is I'm going to put this crime and boroughs count onto the color marked card, which would then color all of my individual details. Or you can do the count distinct of crime ID onto color as well, and this will then color each of those individual segments as part of that to find out which borough has the most crime rates. Now let's move on to some more spatial calculations, but inside Tableau you also have the make point and make line option. So the first thing is to, whenever you're creating a calculation on spatial, you need to create a geometric point. So that's using this make point functionality from before. So this gives me a central point for each of those latitude and longitudes. And I want to know how many crimes took place within a 5-mile radius of Buckingham Palace here in London. This is roughly the latitude and longitude of Buckingham Palace. So what we can do here is we can create a calculation, which is distance. And in here, we can say the distance between Buckingham Palace and the crime point. Oops, let me just move that. And in here, we can tell Tableau what units we want. So I'm going to do with MI, which is miles. You also have kilometers, feet, and meters. So if I click OK, what I can do now is I can add this to my filters. And I want to say, I want at least up to 5 miles. And click OK. And now what happens here is we get this nice radial distance chart. So Buckingham Palace is around here somewhere, and you can see all of that around the outside. But one of the other cool things about using this is we can tell Tableau which particular distance we want to use. So instead of using miles, we can use kilometers. And here's a calculation I did earlier. We just change where it says MI to the distance calculation, the distance parameter. And now when what I can do with this is I can create some bins. So if I create bins here, and we want a bin of, let's say, 1 kilometer for now. And if I click OK, and I'm going to add the one I did previously to my color. And then what happens here is you get this nice graduating effect within our data. So you can see how many kilometers away each of these points are from Buckingham Palace in here. Now, the good thing, I was going to do map layers a little bit later on, but I think it probably makes sense here, is I can add map layers in here. So I roughly know Buckingham Palace is around here somewhere. But if I drag my Buckingham Palace make point, and I can add a mark layer, And what this does is slightly breaks a few things, but I'm going to change this to be smaller. And it's giving me a point for every single latitude and longitude in here, rather than just the individual Buckingham Palace, which is not exactly what I wanted to do. But I think I need to switch my latitude and longitude around. Nope. So I will show you map layers a little bit later and remove that for now, but at least it gives you the idea of the target chart, and you can see all of your layers going outwards. With that in mind, you can also, instead of using the distance calculation, is use the new density marks card. So if you go to your marks and select density, you can then clearly see better where the current hotspots are within this data. So we have some big hotspots around here, and this will allow you to change your opacity and also change the color as well. So you can change to a greeny color and change lots of different measures here so that you can see, probably don't do that, you can see a little bit more in terms of where those hotspots are. And there's a new hotspot down here in the bottom section of this chart. So previously in Tableau, you could create hub and spoke charts, which basically looks a little bit like flight maps. And you had to do some data preparation pre that to get that data. But now with the new make point and make line functionality, you can create your own hub and spoke. So here we have Ed Sheeran's tour details. So we have our tour point, which again is just the make point, latitude and longitude. And I may have stalked him a little bit to get his home latitude and home longitude. It's not exactly precisely where he lives, but it's around there somewhere. But what we can do now is we can use this to create our make line. So we have this option called make line. We want our start point to be our home and our end point to be the tour. So now we have this, so it's make line, home point and tour. If I click OK, if I double click that, you'll see that it brings up this lovely little spider by the looks of things. But if I break that down by concert and by venue, you'll see that each individual things is a point. So if I just take the opacity down, you can see that each one of these is a tour that he did and where he's traveled to. Now, the good thing about this is the make point, the map layers that I just mentioned, is I can see that his house is somewhere in the central point. But what we can do is if I now drag in my map layers, I can then change my home point to be a shape. And in here, I want this to be, I think I have a little house somewhere in my things, my shape folder, which isn't letting me in. So I have a little house that I can make bigger. So now you can see where his little home is in the middle of all that. You can add as many map layers as you want. So I can also then add another map layer for his tour points. So you can then have a little circle at the end of your line as well. And it's continuously, so you can have as many map layers as you want. And hopefully this will come to normal layers in Tableau, but you can rename them. So you can make them a little bit more distinct whenever you're doing some map layer things. So I've done that. Now, normally when I'm doing this type of session, I have someone that takes over from me and does another little bit of tips so I can then take a breather, but I'm going to take one anyway because I feel like I've talked a lot. So let's carry on with some more techniques that you can use. So here we have a bump chart to show you each of the individual ranks for individual subcategories. So if I turn my highlighter on, you can see that this particular furnishings comes in and out of the top 10. But what if I only want to see the top 10? Normally, what you would do is you'd right click on your sales rank, you'd filter, and you'd probably just go 10. But now watch what happens when I highlight furnishings. You can see it comes 9, 2, 5. Okay, that's great. But there's no point here for March. So why is it connecting those lines? If I take my rank back off and highlight furnishings, you'll see it drops out to number 12. I don't want those ranks to connect because it drops out of the top 10. So what we can do here is we can create a new calculation, and we want to call this top 10 rank. So we're going to use Tableau's order of operations here. So whenever you filter something out in Tableau when using a table calculation, it comes before the particular table calculation. So that means that the filter will be applied before the table calc. Whereas if we use something called hiding, it then comes after my table calculation. So we're going to say if the sales rank is less than or equal to 10, then true, else false. I know I could have just done this as a Boolean and just said the sales rank is less than or equal to 10, but just to make it super clear, we're doing it this way. So if I click OK, and if I then add that to my rows, for example, you'll see all of these falses below our top 10. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to right click and hide my I'm going to hide my falses. I'm going to move that to my detail. And this just, oh, I missed one last step, which is you need to create a new sales rank. So we need to say if the sales rank is less than or equal to 10, then give me back the sales rank, else give me null. End. So now we're going to replace that one on top of our rows. And we're just going to make sure that we're compute using subcategory and edit the axes and reverse this. And now if I take off the top 10 rank hide option, you'll see now that my furnishings doesn't connect the lines. So what happens here is it's now giving that particular March value a null. So it can't connect those particular lines. So it's just another way of creating the same sort of the chart type, but just showing particularly when a subcategory drops in and drops out of a particular the top 10. Another thing you might see within the Tableau community or some of the work that you have is when you click on a bar, everything else goes like a lighter color, whereas you actually probably might not want that. You can use a false highlight trick. So my calculation here is highlight. And we've added that to our worksheet. And if I go to worksheet actions, and in here, we're going to just add a highlight action on the selected fields and just the highlight. So in here, we're just going to say, just call it, leave this as highlight 1. Click OK. OK again. And now when I select it, you can still see it's selected by the darker bar on the outside, but it doesn't gray out the rest of your data. So now it doesn't matter which one I click because it doesn't gray out. So it just depends on personal preferences with that one in particular. With, oh, was someone going to say something then? Annabelle, am I okay for time? Yeah? Cool. Okay, I will keep going. So we have our date parameter here, which goes all the way from January through to December 2020. But what happens if, for example, I just wanted to show just the last year's worth of data? So let's pretend we're still in 2020 and I just wanted the parameter to show these particular dates and none of the others. What we can do is we can create calculations and just call this current year's data. And in here, we can say if the year of today equals the year of the order date months, just the order date, then give me back this order date months, else no. Okay, now this actually is obviously going to return nothing because we're in 2021. But what if this was to work correctly? We'd just say if the year is 2020, then okay. So what this does is if I just change this to exact date, click discrete, you'll see that it's only bringing through my 2020 dates. And now when I go into my parameter, I can add values from that current year's data. So now if let me just clear all first. If I add values from my current year's data, you'll see now it's only bringing back my January through to December 2020. But what happens if I want this particular value to, whenever my workbook opens, to be the latest date in my data set or the current month? We can set a calculation in here. So if I click OK, and I'm going to create a new calculation, and I'm just going to call this current month. Now, in normal circumstances, not using a data set which is old, you can use the date trunc function. So if I go date trunc month of order date, this will give you, date trunc month of today. This will give you this month's date. So January, 1st of January, 2021. So we're just going to do a make date, which is 2020 11/01. So this is our current month for this example. Now what I can do in my parameter is I can say my current value should equal my current month. So this will now say November 2020. So if I click OK, but if you want to test that it's working, what we can do is if I right click and edit and change this to December, and I right click on my data source and hit refresh, which is the same instance as it is reopening the workbook, you'll see my parameter automatically change to December 2020. So now that's how the dynamic parameters is coming to play with some dates. And I think I'm almost out of time. Annabelle, do you want me to keep going a little bit more, or do you want me to?
You can take some questions if you would like.
Sure, let's do some questions.
Yeah, so what I'm gonna do is I'll read a few of the kind of top liked questions because that's a really cool feature. But I would ask you to take some time to go head over to the Q&A because there's quite a few questions and lots of people loving the tips that you had. So I think the one thing, and I know lots of people when they saw this feature come out had questions about it, is relationships. So even if you understood joins, you probably are still finding relationships a little tricky. Do you have a recommendation on how to kind of make better sense of the differences between the joins that we used to use and the relationships now?
So I would say that the joins and relationships are still completely different. A relationship is more like a blend, in my opinion, where it's only ever going to use the data that is in your view. So if you have one data set which is 4 records, and this is broken down by daily, if you have a targets data set which has 2 months in it, if you join those together, you're going to multiply the rows on this right-hand table.
Yep.
The relationship stops you from doing that. So whenever you do a relationship with your data, it only ever brings through to the view whatever you drag in. So if you just drag in fields from your targets data, it's not going to use that individual orders table.
Got it.
Probably doesn't make too much sense, but I definitely just say get hands on with it and just try and see how you get on.
Yeah, but it sounds like basically what you're saying is that in a join situation, which if people are familiar with joins, then it'll make sense. It kind of creates a new data that's a combination of two parts based on whatever you did. With the relationships, it kind of leaves the data sets alone. It just brings them all into your kind of viewfinder, and you can pick and choose. So it's like you kind of have to create the join after that. Is that
you've already created the relationship in the data source, but it'll only come into play when you're bringing things into your view.
Cool. Hopefully that helps. If that does not answer the question, feel free to throw it back in the chat. Another one we got was around, and we're kind of in a similar area now, but the advantages of you doing joins in Tableau versus the underlying databases or the underlying, I'll even kind of broaden and say the underlying data set where you could do it beforehand. What do you think of some of those advantages?
I think it depends on how big your data set is. With the new data model, being able to have a relationship between different levels of detail on your data will help a lot within Tableau Desktop. However, if you're still doing joins and things, I'd probably push it back into the database because it then takes the pressure off Tableau. Again, each individual use case is dependent on the data source and the number of records and stuff. So again, it just depends.
Yeah, I would probably say the same thing. It really depends on the data that you have and how easily you can access them, and the tools that you have. I find Tableau is also the easiest of the kind of data manipulation tools to join. So sometimes just for that reason. One more here, and then like I said, lots to discuss here in the Q&A. But and this is, I think this is a great segue because Heidi's going to be giving us even more awesome tips. There's a lot in here. There's a lot of different tips. There's a lot of different places you can go. Kind of, what's your advice for kind of organizing these or collecting some of the tips that you've given so that people can go back to them later or they can find other uses for them at a different time?
Yeah, so on my Tableau public page, I have probably about 3 or 4 different Tableau workbooks with lots of different tips in. I can recommend a few other people. Heidi is one of those people, but Jeffrey Schaefer and Andy Kriebel do tips every day, every week, and they post them to their YouTube channel or their blog. So definitely check out those 2 people for sure. And I just say blog about them. So if you want to remember the tips, do yourself your own blog or your like a Notion pad or something, because then it gives you the links back. Create your own dictionary, essentially.
Yeah, I love that tip. Thank you, Lorna. I'm gonna really quickly before I set up Heidi here. I did put your Tableau Public in the chat, but I'm sure it's been buried now. So if you can throw that back in,
Sure.
that would be great, just so that people can check that out. Just for those that have asked the question a few times, yes, this is being recorded. So you'll have the recording. It'll be on the YouTube channel. The Tableau Public profiles of both Heidi and Lorna, in addition to the other ones that you brought up, are available. So you'll be able to see those as well. So there's not really slides in really any of our talks, but there are Tableau Public workbooks. I think those were the kind of the bigger questions, but we'll keep going from there. Thanks, Lorna.
Thank you.
And Lorna, if you can still answer some of the question, thank you.
Yep, of course, I will.
Just about like the session that you have, normally everyone will find what it is. So we will have beginner session, intermediate, and advanced. So just keep and heard, and you will sure that everyone will learn something. Thank you.
Yep. Cool. All right, I'm gonna pass it over to Heidi now for even more awesome tips.
Perfect. Thank you, Sedale. Pretty hard to follow up on that, but I'll do my best. So this is less of a tips session and more going intensely into 2 new features. So before I start, hi, my name is Heidi Kalbe. Annabelle introduced me already in the beginning, but I'll say a few words anyway. I work as an analytics evangelist and BI consultant with the Information Lab, and I am also a 2020 Tableau social media ambassador, and I co-founded and lead Data Plus Women in Germany. So if you're in the area or basically anywhere, feel free to join our events as well. I'm going to talk about set and parameter actions because, and you may be able to relate to that feeling. Whenever I scroll through my Twitter feed or my LinkedIn feed or browsed Tableau Public, there's so many visualizations that accomplish absolutely incredible things in Tableau that I never thought should have been possible, you know? And that is because Tableau keeps rapidly publishing new features. Like every version brings amazing new features. And 2 of the biggest game changers in recent years, or at least in my opinion, have been set and parameter actions. Now, as I said, we've seen the Tableau Jedis of our community accomplish amazing visits using those parameters and sometimes, or those actions. And sometimes it's a bit, you know, difficult looking up at that. So I want to get down to the basics today. I want to delve into set and parameter actions at a very basic level. So what are we going to talk about? We are going to talk about what we had before set and parameter actions. We are going to talk about what sets and parameters are, how either action changes the way we visualize data, what it is that set actions and parameter actions can and cannot do respectively. And the most important bit, I will tell you how you can decide when to use one over the other. So let's delve right in. What did we have before set and parameter actions? We had, of course, filter actions, and we do still have filter actions. But they do have a number of small drawbacks. So for example, sometimes users can be confused and it can be difficult to understand what is currently being filtered. Or interaction between quick filters and action filters can be messy, even if you synchronize them. When filtering across multiple dashboards, that can sometimes, you know, contain a few bugs, especially with cube data sources. We don't have an option to exclude using an action filter, and depending on our use case, we may have to set up multiple actions. What we also have are highlight actions, but again, they do have a number of small drawbacks. So for example, any highlighting will be gone as soon as we deselect anything. It can be messy to highlight across multiple dashboards. If we're not careful, we may gray whole sheets out with the highlighted field. When we have recalculated reference lines, those recalculations will be reset as soon as we deselect. And again, depending on the use case, we may need multiple actions. And that is where sets come into play. So what are sets? In my training sessions, I like to describe sets as a kind of, you know, an exclusive nightclub. You are either in or you're out. Those are the only 2 options. We create sets for one specific field in one data source, and we decide for each attribute of that field, each element in that, whether it is in the set or not. So basically, sets are glorified Boolean expressions where it's either true when the element is in the set or false when the element is not in the set. And how can we use them? How do they change the way we viz? Well, the most common use case is to use sets for easy filtering, but we can also use them to change our marks by color, size, or shape, and we can even use them to sort our marks. And of course, we can use sets in calculations. They will usually look something like this. So this is probably the most common calculation expression you will find. If set, then measure end. As I said, the set is basically a glorified Boolean field. So this is all the Boolean expression we need in our if statement here. And this will filter implicitly. So let's take a look. let's delve right in. So we have this, this dashboard here. This is not, you know, the pinnacle of design. This is just an example use case. And we are looking at CO2 emissions over time per country. So each country has one line or one bar in this bar chart. And I want to be able to select a number of lines and have the corresponding bars highlighted and vice versa. So I will set up a dashboard action, and this will be a highlight action just to show you what we had before. And when I select either sheet, I want the other sheet to be highlighted using the country name. So if I select a number of lines here, we can see the corresponding bars are highlighted, and we have this recalculated reference line, and it works the other way around as well. So if I select a number of bars, those lines will be highlighted and we have this recalculated reference line. But as I said, as soon as I deselect, that line will be gone. Now I do have a second dashboard actually, which is using the same data source. And I want this to be affected by my highlight action as well. As you can see, it's currently not. For that, I would have to set up a second highlight action. So let's do that real quick. So when selecting either sheet in this dashboard, I want the other dashboard to be affected using the country name again. So let's select a number of bars. The bars are highlighted, reference line is recalculated, lines are highlighted. And in this other dashboard, now my donut slices are highlighted as well, and the bubble chart as well. But the thing is, I can't deselect here. I can't delete the highlight from this dashboard. And that is because we don't have anything selected in here in the first place, because our selection is in the other dashboard. So we have two options, neither of which is super user-friendly. So we can either set up another highlight action in this dashboard, then select something and then deselect, or we can go back to the first dashboard, deselect, and then return to the second dashboard, and now nothing is highlighted anymore. But again, neither of these is super user-friendly. So this is where set actions come into play. So I will go to any of these sheets and first create my set. So you remember I was using the country name for my highlight action. So this is where I'm going to create my set. Go to country name, right click, create a set. Tableau will automatically name this country name set, which is fine in my use case. In general, I do recommend that you rename your fields to be actually helpful to you. And I will select any number of countries in here. Really doesn't matter. This is just for my initial set. And then I can put this on color so that I can see which lines, which countries are in my set. And let me actually change these colors real quick. And everything in will be this light teal and everything out will be a darker gray. And now we can see beautifully everything that is in the set. And if I want to go one step further to highlight this properly, I can put this country name set on size as well. And you can see all the countries that are not in the set are wider now, which of course doesn't make sense. So let's reverse this and let's make those that are in the set a bit wider as well. And now I have these really thick lines for the countries that are in the set and those thinner lines for countries that are not in the set. Returning to my dashboard, I go to this other sheet, and again, let's put country name set on color. And if I scroll down, we can see those countries that are in the set are, of course, colored. Now, you remember that I wanted to have a recalculated reference line that does not react to being selected or not. And we can do that, and you will remember the calculation I mentioned. So let's actually call this emissions of selected countries. And in here, I want the calculation if country name set, then emission, and because the country name set is already a Boolean expression, that's all the if statement I need. And this will only return the emission of the countries that are in the set. And if I now put this on detail and go to analytics and add in a reference line, I can select to have my emissions of selected countries and then make this that beautiful teal color, and we don't actually want a label. And now you can see I have this second reference line for only the countries that are in my set. If I want to sort this, because you can see at the moment I have to scroll in order to find the countries that are in the set, I can as well put my country name set on rows at the very front, so at the very left-hand side. And then all the countries that are in the set will be moved up. And then I can right-click and hide my header because I don't actually need to see that. And now everything that is in the set will always be at the very top of my bar chart. Returning here, I now have to implement my set action. So I go to Dashboard Actions. Actually, I can get rid of both of these, and I can add my Change Set Values action. When selecting in either sheet of these in this dashboard, I want to affect this data source and affect my country name set. And you can see this is the big difference that we have to filter actions and highlight actions. I don't have to specify the target sheets. Because the set is a global element in my workbook, this will be affected everywhere. So every sheet will be affected where I'm using my set. And that makes it a lot easier to implement. I do want to assign my values, and one important bit, I want to keep my set values because that's the benefit we have over the highlight action. And if I hit OK and hit OK again, I can now select any number of lines in here. And we can see the lines change color, they change width, and we can also see the bars over here change color, change the sorting, and the reference line gets recalculated. And the same thing if we select any number of bars in here, again, they change color, they change the sorting, the reference line gets recalculated, and it stays put even when I deselect. And same goes for the lines here. But what about this second dashboard? Well, I can do the same thing in here. So I simply go to any of these elements and I can put my country name set on color now. And you can see in this donut chart, I currently have 264 slices. For the love of God, never create any pie or donut chart with this many slices. That's just insanity. So you should have at the absolute maximum 5 slices. Best is to have only 2 because usually you have one important value and everything else. In this case, my important value are the selected countries, so in the set, and the other value is everything that's out of the set, and that's everything I need, so I get rid of the country names in here. And same thing for the bubble chart. Let's put country name set on color. Now you can see that I have one more sheet in here in this white space or dark blue space, and this is because I want to know the percentage of emissions of the countries that are in my set out of all the countries. So I go in here and I create another calculation. Percentage emissions of selected countries, and let's actually put a percentage sign in here. Now, usually I would have to use some kind of LOD, but I don't in this case because I'm using sets. So I can simply say I want the sum of emissions of selected countries. You remember we just created that calculation 2 minutes ago, and divide that by the sum of total emissions. And that's everything I need. So super easy calculation here. Let's right click and change the default properties to percentage. And let's put this on label. And now I have the percentage of those selected countries in here. And if I go back and I select any other number of countries, we can see the bars change, the reference line changes, the lines are colored and thickened, and in here, the section changes in the donut chart, the according bubbles are highlighted, and the percentage changes as well. And I didn't need to set up a second action because, as I said, set actions are global. So that is one very simple use case for set actions. And now let's actually check this out. Can I, sorry. So what is it that we can and cannot do? So we can use set actions to filter, and we can use that to both include and exclude. I didn't show either of that right now, but just it's possible. We can also use set actions to change the color, size, and shape of our marks, or even the sorting, as you saw with the bar chart. We can use set actions to change the scope of calculated fields, as you also saw both in the emissions of selected countries and the percentage of those emissions, and they will react to single and multi-selection. But there are a few limitations that we have here. For example, we cannot use a measure for set actions. We cannot use multiple fields because the set always attaches to one specific field. And because of that, they will not span multiple data sources either. And that is where parameters come in. But what are parameters? So I like to describe parameters as values floating around in space. And they are completely detached from any kind of data source that we have until we build a bridge to that data source. So we do have to create a calculated field or use them in a filter or anything like that in order to build that bridge to the parameter. And we can use parameter actions to filter and calculate relative to a value, which is something we can't do in set actions. We can use them across multiple databases because, again, we can build that bridge from anywhere. And of course, we can use them to set reference lines. So let's look at this example right here. We have 3 different data sources in here. We have the Superstore, which you probably all of you know. We have monthly Kickstarter pledges, and we have the average CO2 emissions, which you just saw earlier. And I want to combine all of these using a parameter action. And for that, I like to use this acronym CAUSE, which is create, apply, use, set up your action, and enjoy. First up, we have the C, create. Of course, we can't implement a parameter action if we haven't created a parameter first. So let's go to any of these sheets and start setting this up. So first of all, create a parameter. In this case, I want to have a focus year, and this will be an integer value, and I will allow all values. Let's actually set an initial value of, let's say, 2012 or something. And now I have created my parameter, but nothing happens because, as I said, this parameter is just floating about in space. We don't have any kind of connection to that parameter yet. That is why we need to apply it. So that's the A for apply. We have to create a calculated field. And this is, let's say, color years. And this is where we apply it. So I want to know the difference between the focus year, my parameter, that's why it's in purple, and my year that I have in the data, that's why it's orange. And when the difference is 0, then it's the same year. When it's 1, then it's the previous year. And in any other case, it's just another year. And that is all the calculation I have here. As you can see, I can calculate relative to my parameter. And let's put this on color. And you can see we have these colors that I'm going to change a bit. So everything other should be dark gray. My same year should be highlighted in orange, and the previous year will get this sunshine yellow. And now those 2 years, so the same and the previous year, are highlighted. And this is where I used my parameter calculation. Going back in here, I will go to the monthly Kickstarter pledges. I've already created the parameter. I just need to apply this in, that was wrong, sorry, in my calculated field. So again, let's color year, and I need to set up another calculation because it's a different data source, which is one of the benefits. And again, I want to know the difference between the focus year and the year of my date. And when it's 0, then it's the same. When it's 1, then it's the previous. And in any other case, it's other. So pretty similar calculation. And again, let's put this on color and change the colors to be the same in here. Real quick. And there we go. So same colors highlighted differently. And if I set up my action, I have to actually set up one action for each data source that I want to originate this action from. So let's start with my CO2 emissions. When I select my CO2 emissions and nothing else, I want to affect this focus year parameter using the year field. And I don't want to aggregate because I only want to select one value at a time. And same thing for the monthly Kickstarter pledges. So when I select the Kickstarter pledges, I want to affect the focus year using the year of created at, and I do not want to aggregate in any way. And if I now select, for example, 2013, we can see that the colors up here change and the colors of the bars change. And if we select 2011, again, same thing. The colors of the bars change, the colors of the lines change. Let's actually select 2014 just to make sure. Same thing. And as you can just see, which was accidentally, if I select multiple, nothing changes because I selected to not have any kind of aggregation, which means if I select multiple marks, nothing will happen. The parameter action will not be triggered. But what about my Superstore sales? Now, there's two things I want to do here. First of all, I want to be able to sort by the sales values of the year which I'm focusing on. And I want to have two color scales in here. So I don't simply want this to be orange or gray. I want this to be a diverging color. So I want a continuous color scale of orange, and I want varying shades of gray. And let's do this. So for that, I need two calculated fields in this case. I want the sales of my focus year, and I want to know if the focus year is the same as the year of order date. Then I want to know my sales in else null, which is the same as not putting any else statement. And let's actually copy this and create another calculated field, which is sales of other years. Put this in here. So if my focus year is not the same as the year of order date, then I want to have my sales. And let's actually replace the sales value by sales of the focus year. And let's sort this because now it automatically sorts by the sales in my focus year. And I want the sales of the other years to be put on the same axis. And let's get rid of measure names. Now you will say that nothing much has changed, and that's not wrong, but I want to color. So that's the second thing I wanted. And I'm going to put measure values on color. Again, nothing too exciting until I right click on measure values and use separate legends. Because now I have the opportunity to color the sales of my focus year in this beautiful orange gold color scale. And I can color all the other years with this grayscale color scale. And if I return to my dashboard now and select, for example, 2012, you can see that the colors change for the lines and the bars, but also the sorting changes and the color scales change in my Superstore sales per subcategory. So very easily done, very simple use case that we have here with 3 different data sources. Now, in this use case, I only triggered the parameter action on single select, but what if we want to apply multiple values to the parameter, which is not something that parameters can do, but we can work around that using this aggregation feature that we have. For example, I have, again, my Superstore, and I have a whole number of customers with different initials. And I want to use this keyboard, which is just a simple helper data source that I created, to select the initials of customers that should be colored. So let's start again with the create. I will need to create a parameter, and this will be selected initials, and that should be a string value. Again, allow all kind of values. And I need to apply that in a calculated field. So this will be color letters. And now, if my parameter of selected initials contains the characters, then I want to know that character, and else I want to put other end. And let's apply, so this is where I applied it. Now I'm going to use it by putting it on color. And let's actually change this to a more boring gray, just to make sure it's all gray. And if we go to this other data source, again, we need to apply this. So color letters again. And if my selected initials parameter contains the first letter of my customers, then I want to know that first letter, and else I want this to simply be other. And again, let's use this by putting it on color. And let's make this gray again. Now, one last sheet where we need to put this, I have this number of customers by initial. Again, I've already applied this. I just need to use that, put this on color, put this also on rows so that I will get different bars. And I don't actually want to know the number of other customers. So let's actually exclude this. Now, for the moment, it's empty. And I need to set up my action. So that's the S. Go to actions, change the parameter. And when selecting the keyboard, I want this to affect my selected initials parameter using the character. And in this case, I do want to aggregate because I want to be able to select multiple keys on my keyboard, and I want to concatenate. And if I hit OK, and now it's time to enjoy this, because when I select multiple letters in here on my keyboard, they will be colored. I will have the bar chart in here, and my scatter plot will be colored as well. So again, very simple example, 2 data sources with a multi-selection use case. So let's check. What is it that parameter actions can and cannot do? So we can use parameter actions to take values from different fields. We can use them to aggregate values. They do span multiple data sources if we want them to. And we can use them to change the color, to label, and of course, to set reference lines. They do have one limitation, and that is that they cannot take more than one value at the moment. But as I showed you, we can kind of work around that by using the concatenate function. But now, and that's the most important bit, how can you decide when to use one over the other? And that is actually, I'm just gonna try and go into full screen mode, but I can't. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so how can we decide when to use one over the other? There's a few different aspects that we have to take into account where that depends upon. So for example, the number of data sources. If we have just the one data source, then you are absolutely fine to use either set or parameter actions, but as soon as you have multiple, you need to use parameter actions. Same for the number of origin fields. If you have only the one, either action is fine. As soon as you have multiple, you do need to use parameter actions. How about the value type? So if you have discrete values, either action is fine. As soon as you have continuous values, you do need to use parameter actions. Selection, of course, we can use single value selection for either action, and we can use multi-value selection for either action as well, but they will react differently. So if we select multiple values in a set action, all those values will be will affect the set. So either all values will be assigned to the set or added to the set or removed from the set, depending on how you set up your set action. For parameter actions, all those values that you selected will be aggregated, and then that aggregated single value will be assigned to the parameter. So different way how they react. For styling, you can of course use both actions to color and size your marks. And for filtering, again, you can use both to filter, but they will react differently. So for example, for set actions, you can use to filter multiple values, and you can use parameter actions to filter relative to a value. And that was it. So you learned what we had before and why that did not suffice, or what some issues with that were. You learned what sets and parameters are, how to use them, how to change the way that you visualize data, what it is that either of them can or cannot do, so abilities and limitations. And I just showed you how to decide when to use set actions over parameter actions, or vice versa. Usually it's vice versa. There is a whole number of resources out there, and I definitely suggest you check those out. So anything from Bethany Lyons via Lindsay Poulter, the Flalich twins, so many fantastic resources out there for really good step-by-step instructions, examples that you can check out. If you want to get down to the basics, so check out what I showed you today. You can find all of that detailed on my blog at queenofdata.net/setitup. And with that, thank you so much for listening today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them now and to answer them later. And do enjoy the rest of this Tableau user group.
Thank you very much, Heidi. Yes, we had a lot of questions for you.
Fantastic.
About sets. One specific question was about the number of, the amounts of data. Is very with like any problem when you want to try to do a set and you have a huge number of data.
Well, I haven't tried it with huge amounts of data yet, to be very honest. In this case, you could see that I had 264 values, so different countries in my set, and it does work. So as always, performance depends on a whole lot of different things. Size of your data source, are you using live connection or not? How many marks do you have in your view, etc. I haven't encountered any issues with performance in that aspect yet.
Yeah, if you, the last question that we had, how can we use parameter to apply and user selection to be carried over across two visits based on different data source? So I suppose that they are asking about parameter action.
Mm-hmm. So again, parameters are global. And the parameter action basically just specifies where you originate your set action. So where do you have to click in order for something to happen? But it does affect every sheet, every dashboard where that parameter is being used. So you can very easily carry that over to other dashboards that are using the same parameter.
We have one question from Robert Kramer. I will read it to you, but you can also see it. I love playing with set. We also had a lot of message from saying that you were fantastic, Heidi.
Thank you.
So Robert Kramer's question. I love playing with set, but I have run into one issue. On the desktop version of Tableau, I can select a group of data points and select to remove those specific data points for a given set. I have yet to figure out how to do that on the web version, since that's not an option. I think it's he has probably not the latest Tableau server.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So maybe if your Tableau server or Tableau online environment is not on the same version as your Tableau desktop, that will of course vanish. And also one limitation that set actions have, you will not be able to trigger them when you use a storyboard. So that's another limitation. Maybe that's a reason why it doesn't work.
Yeah, we had a storyboard question. So, yeah, I will say that this was answer live. You can pick yours, huh? Yes, why don't set action work in storyboard? That's a limitation. We cannot do much more. You can try
why doesn't it work? Because the feature of storyboards is that every story point does not change when you change another story point. So everything that happens globally will be disabled in a storyboard, which is great if you want that, and not so great if you rely heavily on set actions. So that's what you have to keep in mind. Set actions will not work in storyboards.
And let's take another one. And after we'll pass the mic to Sedale. You can still answer others. One from John Roloff. For parameter filter, how do you allow selecting multiple years? Aggregation or with a list to be allowed?
Difficult. So again, this will a list will not be allowed. That's a limitation of parameters, unfortunately. What you can do, you can either somehow change the years to a string type, then concatenate, and then use again a string conversion in the other fields where you try to check whether that is contained in the parameter or not. Or what you can also do, you can set up two parameters and then use a minimum aggregation for one parameter, use a maximum aggregation for the other parameter, and then check whether each value is in between those two parameters. Of course, if you want a list where you don't have like all the years in between, so if you want to use 2011, 2012, and 2020, and not all the other years in between, then you would have to use the string concatenation option I first described.
Great. Thank you very much, Heidi.
Thank you.
And Sedale, the stage is yours.
Sorry, was on mute. Hello, everyone. Thank you all. This has been really, really great. Sorry, 1 second.
We cannot hear you, Sedale. You're on mute again.
I think he may have put himself on mute on purpose.
Okay, just to be sure, you know, sometimes. So you can.
Sorry, guys. Sorry, I'm back. Lots going on today, and if you're anywhere in the U.S., you understand. Anyway, let me share my screen. Yeah, and you can see what's going on. So Annabelle, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can see hidden content.
Perfect. All right, everybody. So we've had a lot of really awesome tips so far, and I've got one more for you, and that is adding hidden context to dashboards. And so this is a talk that I gave during the last Tableau conference. And in it, we talked a lot about how to think about dashboard design, and especially when you're intermediate or a little bit earlier in your Tableau process. I think this is a really great technique for a lot of people to use. So I've kind of introduced myself a little bit earlier, Annabelle did, but I'll do so again just so you know where I'm coming from with this. I'll also talk about the inspiration for this talk and where I come from and where I think this might be useful. And then we'll spend most of our time in Tableau talking about how to add that context to your dashboards. I'll also leave some references because I think there's a lot of people doing a really great job with this. So my day job, I am a digital insights analyst with a company called Purple Strategies, where I answer this question for people. What are people saying about our clients? What are people saying about our business? What are people saying about the topics that we care about? I do so in the DC area, so lots happening today if you're in that area or if you're in the US. Also, I'm looking at the clock as well as many of you. I promise to be done before Biden hits the stage. I joined the Tableau DC user group in 2019 and really spent the bulk of 2020 getting engaged with the Tableau community and getting deeper and more involved. So in June, I actually got my first certification. So that is the Tableau Desktop Specialist. I've also been lucky enough to be a Tableau Public Featured Author in August, which was an amazing accomplishment and really happy to get that. I also was a part of the Tableau Community Equity Task Force. And for those that don't know, the Equity Task Force is a group of people that are advancing diversity among the Tableau community, but also data sets itself. So we spend time having discussions and we come together as a group to really find different ways to increase diversity among all sorts of different populations and groups. There's about 12 of us. And if you aren't done hearing me talk after I'm done with this talk, I'm actually going to be a panel on Friday, along with Chantilly, who's a Tableau Zen master, and Ray from the Tableau team. So it's going to be a really great discussion. I'm happy to share links with anyone that's interested in that. And then lastly, as you're all aware, I am a part of this dynamic duo standing up this Tableau user group. When I'm not talking about Tableau or data, I'm either talking about sports, wine, social impact, not always in that order. So this talk was really inspired, but mostly about the Tableau journey itself. When we're first starting out with Tableau and we got the tool for ourselves, we got it from work or we downloaded Tableau public. When we first get it, we're just trying to create anything, right? So how can we put the pills together? There's a blue pill and a green pill. There's a marks card somewhere. There's filters on the top right. There's this whole show me button. We're just trying to figure out how do we put the pieces together to just create something. And we do that. And we create something like a quick bar graph or a line graph, and you'll see that, for example, you might have years across the bottom. There's a 0 on this one, interestingly, so probably need to work out what's happening there. And then across the axis, you have some number of things like accidents, for example. But there's not really a lot of information here. When you look at it, there's a number of accidents. We know whatever that number is, it's increasing over time. But what kinds of accidents are these? Are these plane crashes, car crashes? Where are these accidents happening? They could be in the US, they could be global, they could be in a different country. And so you kind of need a little bit more information to really make this visual effective. However, once we get a little bit better and we start to learn how this tool works, we tend to go the opposite direction. Now we know how to use color, we know how to use different graph types, we know how to use labels, and we throw it all into the dashboard. And so we've got a ton of information, and then you've got the opposite problem where you've got a ton of data and you can't make heads or tails of the dashboard because there's just too much information. So what I'm hoping to do with you all today, and if you have questions, please reach out to me, is help you design dashboards that have a lot of information, but they also allow you to drill into them instead of having everything on the dashboard. And so the technique I'm going over today is called show hide containers. They're also called collapsible containers. People call them that as well. And these containers do a lot of really interesting things. It was a feature, I believe it was 2019.2 or maybe 0.3, don't quote me on that. But it was in that area of the product, and it does a lot of really interesting things. For example, it could give you instructions on how to use your dashboard. So that's one that I'll show today. It can also add context to a specific graph. So maybe you want to throw additional labels on a graph, but you don't want them to stay there all the time. Swapping is a great way to use show hide containers, and that's something that's typically done with a parameter, but you can also use containers for that. You can also change metrics. Maybe you want to look at something as a bar graph in one instance and a map in another instance. Maybe you want to look at revenue versus profit. This is a great way to use that. But I want to encourage you guys, there's a lot of ways you can use it. There's a lot of different ways to think about this. So I don't want you to just look at the examples I gave, which is why I'll show some references later, but also just understand that there's a lot of different ways to use the tool. Okay, I think that is plenty of setup. So now I'm going to go ahead and jump into Tableau. So I'm going to take the first 2 examples of using collapsible containers, and then as I mentioned, I'll show later on, I'll show ways to do the other examples. So we should be able to just pop right into Tableau. So I'm going to move some of these features. Oh, it sounds like a few people have been using the show hide filter, so that's amazing. So I've got here a dashboard based on coronavirus cases that I created earlier in the process. The data currently is as of last week. Unfortunately, we are now over 400,000 deaths, but this is a dashboard that has a lot of information on it, which is why I'm using it as an example. You can kind of see a lot going on. We've got our numbers at the top. We have we've got some numbers over the course of some time. We've got a map here. there's a lot here. And so what I want to do is be able to tell people what's going on this dashboard so they can navigate it, but also want them to understand what's going on behind this dashboard. And so I've created this kind of sheet here that now allows us to see some things. So now we can see that this date is based on the most recent data. It's from Johns Hopkins University. We can see that this is over the last 30 days. We can see that this map and this table also filter the entire dashboard. We can also see that the states are ordered by population. All that's really useful information, but we don't need it to be there all the time. So once we're done with that, we can just kind of get rid of it. So that's why I've developed this right here. So I'm going to walk through how to do it pretty slowly. Again, you don't have to take notes. This is available on my Tableau public. It's also recorded. So just kind of sit back and watch it happen. So what we're going to do first is create all the creative elements that we need to create this filter. So we'll go to dashboard and you can export your image here. And then I've already got it saved, so I won't save it, but that just allows us to go back into PowerPoint and create what we want to create. So here's the dashboard. I just created an example that I could use to make my shape. The reason I wanted to do it this way is that it allows you to get the right shape and the right size, but it's mostly helpful to get the right shape. Tableau will adjust the size of the image to the dashboard, but if you have the right shape, it'll also make sure that everything gets lined up appropriately. So from here, we'll just add a rectangle here. And that rectangle, we want to be black. We also want it to have no outline. And then one more thing I'll do, if you click on Shape Fill and go to More Fill Colors, we want to change that transparency to 30. I like 30 because it's dark enough that you can put things on top of it, but also light enough that you can see what's behind it. So it's perfect for what we're trying to do right now. Now, what we want to do is make sure that this lines up exactly with our dashboard. And so when we click on the dashboard, and this zoom thing is in my way now. If we go to picture format on the top, we will see, there we go. On the top right, you'll see the height is 6.4 inches and the width is 11.38 inches. So we want our rectangle to take that same format. So we'll go to 6.4 and we'll go to 11.38. And then what we want to do is line this up with the corner. So you'll see on the top right, top left, that there's a red line going up and a red line going across. That means we've got the corner. It's a rectangle. So if we got one corner, then we have all the corners. So now we can add our text boxes. I'll do just a very quick example here. So we can grab our text box. We can just throw in some text like data reflects most recent GHU data. Pro tip here, this is where we want to make sure that we've got the right fonts. So take the font, whatever font you have on your dashboard, make sure that that's happening here as well. We'll make that white. I will quickly make this a little smaller. It's just an example. And then I'll insert an arrow. I really like this kind of curved arrow because it allows you to kind of create shapes. Oops. It allows you to kind of create whatever shape you need. And so with this kind of arrow, I can adjust the beginning of the arrow, the end of the arrow, or the middle. So I can make this more of a curved sort of arrow. And so I can make that a little bit thicker. I can also make that white. And so there we go. Now we've got an arrow facing here. And so you can do that a bunch. We'll do a little TV magic. I've got all of this together. The last thing we want to do here is you want to control click all of the different elements. And then you can right click and group it. So that puts it all in one place. And so at that point, you have an image that you can move all around, but more importantly, you can right click and save it as a picture. PowerPoint usually saves things as a PNG, but in case yours doesn't, make sure that you're saving as a PNG. Now we can go back to Tableau, and I've got a copy of this dashboard without the without the section there already. And so what we'll do now is we will go to dashboard and we will create a floating container. For this this version, it doesn't matter if we do a vertical or horizontal container. If you're not sure what that is, feel free to throw a question in the comment box and I can go over it. Or there are lots of different tutorials on how those work. But we've got our vertical, we got our floating container, and we will put an image object in there. To put an object in a container, you have to hit Shift. That is there. We'll go ahead and fit and center because we know we'll need that. And then I will go to my instructions overlay, hit OK. Now we know we've got the right shape, so all we need to do is put it in the right place with the right size. So we'll go to layout, we'll click this top button. We want the whole dashboard, so that's the size we're looking for, and we know that's 1366 by 768. And we also know it's in position 00, which means the very top and the very right, the very top left. So we'll double click our object. You can only resize the container. You cannot resize the object inside of it until you obviously resize the container. So that was 1366. That was 768. And it was positioned at 0 and 0. Voila, we've got our thing positioned in the right place. The last thing that we need to do in terms of developing the container is to go to, you hit the button, this button right here with the container, and then add show hide button. And we can go ahead and drag that over here and add that here. And for all intents and purposes, we're pretty much done here. You can alt click these images and we've got the functionality we want. However, I find that not everyone knows what this hamburger menu means, and this X may not always be clear either. So I love to create buttons for all of my show hide containers. So that's what we're going to do here. And so back in PowerPoint, I've got these buttons that are just rectangular shapes. So you can create a rectangular shape here. And then if you double click it, you can put in text. And then just as we did before, we can save that as a PNG. And once you have those, the way that we'll do it, now I'll do this a little slowly because it can be counterintuitive. When the image is hidden, we want people to know that they can turn it on. So that's what we'll do. Instructions. And when the image is shown, we want them to know that they can take the image away. So we'll go to return to dashboard. And there we have it. So once you alt click this, you have instructions and you've got return to dashboard. So that's that. A quicker version, now that we've got some of those skills already, is as a consultant, I often have multiple clients. So I will have an executive level client that just wants to print this out, that just wants to put this in a PowerPoint slide or PDF, and they don't need any of the functionality. But I might have on his same team an analyst that does want to change the filter or they want to make updates. So what I'll do often is I'll take whatever they want to filter and I'll throw the show hide container on top of it so that we have one dashboard but two use cases. So what I want to do is I want to add this worksheet to that dashboard. So this one is a number of cases over the past 30 days, but it includes an average line and this parameter that allows us to adjust how many days back we want to go. It's called the last in days parameter. You can look that up as well on how to do that. But this allows us to change it to the past 45 days. We could change it to the past 15 days. We'll keep it to 30, for example. But that's how that parameter works. And so back here on that dashboard, what we want to do is we want to go back and create another floating container. This time we do need a vertical container because I'm going to put something on top of that worksheet. And so I'll add this here. Don't forget to put an object in a container. You have to hit Shift. And now we've got that. We'll go ahead and remove our title. And then what we do now, I'm actually going to put a horizontal container on top of our vertical container. And the reason I want to do that is because I want to add two things above the graph side by side. So when you have a vertical container, you can stack things up. When you have a horizontal, you could bring things side by side. I do not want my filter keys. And so one of the things that I want to do is add this filter here to the dashboard, to that graph. And then I also want to add a blank object, because that blank object, sit in there, is where I'll put my button to update that filter. Now all we have to do, like we did before, is line this up. One last thing that we want to do, though, because we're putting this over some other text, is we're going to make this white so that nothing shows behind this dashboard. Now we just need to line it up. So we've got this graph, which is 941. Oh, I know why. We also want to remove this legend. We don't need that. Now this should be 1068, which it is better. 1068 by 234. We've also got this blank section that I use to put some space here. That's another 35 pixels high. So I'm looking up here, and then it's positioned at 290 by 280. You don't have to remember these things. I've done this a bunch, and now I remember them all. So we'll double click again to have this container that we want to size, and we'll change this to 1068 by 269. That's the 234 plus the 35. And then this was positioned at 290, which is this section of the dashboard, and 280. Perfect. The last thing that we want to do is add our show hide button. So again, you click this arrow, select show hide, and we've got our button here. And so again, you don't have to create buttons if you don't want to. This works exactly as it should, but always easier, always more user-friendly when you can add buttons and let people know what to look at. So when the item is shown, we want our executive user to be able to remove the filter so he can print his things off. And when the image is hidden, we want our analyst to be able to add the filters. So there we have it. I'll make this a tiny bit bigger. And now we've got the functionality that we need. All right, I am almost done, I promise. So as I mentioned before, there's a lot of different reasons to use this. And so I want to share some resources that are available to you. Developed a talk on BizConnect, which is a Friday morning for me, but depending on where you are in the world, webinar series. And she did one on collapsible containers that was really interesting and useful. Ryan at Play for Data developed a blog post on how to create toggle buttons. So just like the purple buttons I created, you can use, you can go back and forth with it. Mark Reed, who's speaking at an upcoming event of ours, created a blog post on how to create these instruction guides using the show hide container. And then Kevin Flairledge developed a blog post pretty early, just about as soon as it came out, the collapsible containers came out. So wrapping this up, collapsible containers are amazing for adding context without too much clutter. It allows you to self-edit your dashboard, so you can put things behind the scenes so they're not always sticking on your dashboard. There's a lot of different ways to use this technique. Zach Gase, who there was a question around resources, and I mentioned Zach in that. He does Tableau tips every day. And one of his tips was how to use the container to show backup data for a dashboard, which I thought was a really clever way to use it. And I say that to say, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to anyone in the data fam. I'm always available. I'm always happy to answer questions. If you have any questions that we can't get to today on Twitter, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. My Tableau Public is also available. To be honest, if you look for a Sedale and that person's interested in data, it's most likely me. There are very few of us on the planet. So yeah, that is all I have. So I don't know, Annabelle, if you can see the questions, or I'm also happy to play speaker and host at the same time.
You want me to read the question with my French accent, I'm sure. So yes, we have some question about when do you use floating container, and which problem that's happened with this automatic dashboard?
Oh, sorry. You broke up a little bit, but essentially your question was about when to use floating versus tile containers.
And the problem with automatic dashboard, you know, compared to fixed size.
Yeah, it's so for this technique, show high containers, you need floating dash. In terms of when to use floating versus tile containers, that is a big debate that everyone will have really strong opinions of. I personally, for business-based dashboards or for dashboards where you're trying to use a lot of different sections, tiled is most helpful because it automatically locks things into place for you. And when you add something to a tile dashboard, it will make room, but it will try to keep things kind of in a similar space or state. Floating dashboards are great when you want things that are going to go on top of each other or behind each other. So if you're going to use images, that's a great way to do that, is using floating containers. I often do both. I will have some tile dashboards. I'll have some tile dashboards with floating containers on top. I'll have floating dashboards entirely with something tiled in the back. It really is going to depend on how you want yours to be set up. And so what I would advise a lot of people, and I don't know if I have it's sitting under my computer. 1 second. I do a lot of drawing, and I'm sure most of you also do drawings. So you will see, like, I will do all kinds of scripting and creation before I get into Tableau. And that's because it'll then tell me whether or not I need a tile container versus a floating one.
We have another question. When you print, will it print the button, the show and hide button?
Yes, and so that's something to think if you are if you're doing that specifically for that. And in my example, the executive user, and it wasn't that dashboard, but it was a different one. And in that case, they were okay with it, the button being there, as long as they didn't have all the filters and the weird lines on it. But yes, when you print, it would include the button. So you may want to develop a button that won't be as prominent if you're hoping to print it.
There is like another question. Does the PNG file align if users have different resolution or screen size?
That is a fantastic question. It gets slightly out of Tableau, but I think it's important to think about. If you have different screen size is not going to be too deeply impacted by the file type of an image. But PNGs are best for web printing. Obviously, if you're a designer, then using a flat vector would be best. But PNGs for us, normal people, are usually the best. It's going to be the best for that issue, for differences in resolution, for differences in size. PNGs allow you to do that. The other obvious thing is that they come without the background. Most transparent backgrounds are PNGs or vector files.
Okay, let's take another question. And I think that after we have to go on because we still have so much to say. Yeah, one question is not about container, but I think it's very useful for a lot of people. How can we get rid of scroll bar on the dashboard? Dashboard appear good without scroll bar on Tableau Desktop, but once we publish on server, it shows scroll bar.
Interesting. So there's a few things. Hopefully you can create the dashboard and you can size it so that doesn't appear. Often what I try to do, and that's another great reason to draw the dashboard out first, is that if you size it so that the things kind of fit on there. The second thing to do is make sure that when you have your worksheets, that all of your worksheets are set to entire view. So what it'll do is it will take whatever size you have and it will push everything into that space. When you do fit width or fit height, you create those scroll bars. So it'll keep all the information, but it'll have a scroll bar in front. If you use entire view, that should fix your problem. The other one I would say is make sure that your dashboard is big enough, but all things that will happen as you kind of develop the dashboard and iterate it.
So yeah, for the question, we'll try to answer maybe a little longer. We answered
and again, you know,
100 question, huh? So we did 100 question at most, 90. So yeah, I will.
And so I'm happy to come back if anyone has additional questions, and if you feel free to reach out to me as well. But yeah, I think with that we can start to go. Oh wait, I stopped sharing. Let me get this back. Share. Here, I can just share this now. Go a bunch of different places. All right. So again, thank you all. So many thoughtful questions and comments and thoughts on this. So one quick thank you to Caroline and Alyssa, who has been our comment and Q&A hero over the past couple of hours, helping us get to all of your questions and thoughts, but also Caroline and Louis, who have been really instrumental in helping us put this group together and this talk together. All fantastic individuals on the Tableau side. We really appreciate all of your time, and we thank you for getting us going. But this also, is going to be, really helpful with you all. So if you are interested in presenting or you're interested in being a part of a talk about analytics, you can use this to apply. You can also reach out to us, and I'm happy to send the links around, but you can use this here. I will hold this for a couple of seconds so everyone can use their phones to sign up, because I know all of you want to. We'll also be, of course, reaching out to people as well to make sure we have the best talks that we can every single week. Our next talk will be next month. It'll be about a month from now in February. Here are all the times in different time zones. And so that talk will be an awesome one with Mark Reed, who is a expert, and we'll be talking about maps. Samantha and Shay on the Tableau side talking about interactivity, and then Annabelle gets a time to be a speaker, and she's going to be telling us all about parameter actions, which is something that I think a lot of people can get a lot of use out of, and I know myself is something that I'm trying to build a skill set in as well. So I'll be really excited about that. We will be promoting it, so definitely stay tuned for that event next month. Okay, I think we're all set. Annabelle, I don't know if you had any other thoughts or comments before we move to the networking.
Just to mention that, don't worry, tomorrow we will have this webinar recorded on the YouTube channel, and we will send an email with all the information. So don't worry.
Yep. Fantastic. Well, if anyone wants to continue to hang out with us, I'll just leave this on for whoever wants to head over. It is limited to 200 people. So if you aren't able to join this time, this more often, so you'll always have an ability to come and check us out there. But otherwise, thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Sedale and Annabelle, for organizing. It was great to be a part of it.
Yeah. Thank you to every one of you for coming from the first, but not last.